you're baking your cakes and doing your shopping and cleaning your house, but maybe not all at the same time. And just having a lovely day. And thank you for joining in with us in KOORI Radio Station 93.7 FM. Respects to the elders past, present and future of our land. And this morning we'd like to continue with our story written by Annis Gunn in 1905. Me king all right. How to punish Bet-Bet puzzled me more than anything. I often excused her naughty tricks because in thought she knew no better, but in certain things I was determined she should obey. The hardest work of all was to stop her from chewing tobacco. When I told her she must not, she smiled sweetly, and the very first chance she got begged pieces of chewback from the lubras. Whipping her was no good, for I couldn't hurt a little, I only seemed to tickle her. You too much, little fellow, missus, she exclaimed cheerfully, and other punishment she got nothing but fun out of. I gave her sewing to do, and she threaded ticks onto her needle and cotton. I gave her bread and water for dinner, and she and Sue, her dog, caught water rats, and Bet-Bet made a fire and cooked them. In fact, they had a splendid picnic. I took Sue away from her and chained her up, but the little dog howled so dismally that I was more punished than Bet-Bet. I shut her in the bathroom by herself. She was always called it the boogie house, and she pretended that she was hiding from her enemies and told Sue awful tales of the Willaroo blacks through the cracks under the door. I could think of nothing else, and I was at my wit's end. But the ever-cheerful Bet-Bet continued to chew tobacco. In despair, I had almost decided to send her back to the bush, when she suggested a fearful punishment herself, of course, without meaning to do so. I was busy painting some shelves one morning and allowed Bet-Bet to help. She enjoyed it very much and spattered herself and the ground for yards around with daubs of white. By and by, the heat and the smell of the paint made us both sick. Bet-Bet was very bad, and she thought she was going to die. Me close up dead fellow, missus, she moaned. Poor little mite. She had never been sick before in her life and thought that her inside was coming right out. When she was well again, she asked me what had made her so ill, and I said it was the paint. Next day, she was singing like a young skylark and chewing away at a piece of tobacco in between times. I was very angry indeed with her and decided to send her bush, calling her sternly, "Come here, Bet-Bet." To my surprise, she screamed and cried out, "No more, missus, me good fellow. S'pose you no more make me fellow longer pant." I saw at once what she was afraid of. I had the paint pot and brush in my hands, and she thought I was going to paint her, to make her sick for punishment. I put them down and told her to come to me. Bet-Bet, I said, will you be a good girl if you don't paint this time? You are, Mrs. Straightfellow, she sobbed, and you will not chew tobacco. No more, Mrs. Straightfellow. Straightfellow missing, honour bright. Very well, I said, putting the brush down. I will not paint you today, and that I had very little trouble with her after that, for the sight of the paint pot made her as good as gold. Bet-Bet loved polishing the silver, particularly the biscuit barrel, which she called, "Little fellow, Billy can belonga biscuit." One morning we were busy with it on the veranda. She shouted out from the lubras of Google Eye, came one, made Bet-Bet scurry round the house like a young rabbit. It was always like this, and I began to wish that the blacks would be less particular about falling in love with their relations. As he came along, Google Eye had a headache, for he had his wife's belt around his head. It was a wonderful thing how quickly a wife's belt or hair ribbon will charm away a headache. It only fails when she has been up to mischief of any sort. And of course, when a lubra's belt does not cure her husband, he knows she's been naughty and punishes her as she deserves. The lubras say that the belts do not always speak the truth, but the men say they do. Whichever way it was, they are mean, horrid telltales. I told Google Eye I was sorry for him, and as he looked really ill, and I gave him a dose of Epsom salts to help the belt cure, and to save Mrs. Goggle Eye, the Queen, from a beating. He took it, then sitting down under the veranda, nursed his head in his hands. A poor, forlorn old king. As he sat with his back to me, I saw a peculiar mark on his shoulder that I had not noticed before and wondered what it meant. All black fellows have thick, ugly scars up and down their bodies and limbs, but Goggle Eye had more than most men. He told me once that he made a great deal of them himself with a stone knife. After his first corroboree, he had cut himself a good deal to show the tribe that he was a man now, and not afraid of pain. Of course, when any near relatives had died, he'd cut himself all over his arms and his thighs to let the spirit know that he was truly and properly sorry. Whenever a black fellow dies, all his friends cut themselves a little, but his near relations gash themselves terribly, because if the spirit thinks they are not sorry enough, he will very likely send devils along to punish them for the harshness of heart. After a good long cry, the wise men say that the spirit is satisfied. I don't know how they tell, and then everybody rubs hot ashes into the wounds. This heals them very quickly, but it makes the scars into big, ugly welts that will never fade. Goggle Eye would often talk about this as often as I'd like to listen, but whenever I asked him the meaning of the marks on his back or shoulders, he always answered, "Nothing," and either changed the subject or walked away. When a black fellow says nothing, it's like that. It simply means that he's not going to tell. For when he really doesn't not understand the meaning of a law or custom, he answers all day like that, which means that his fathers did it, and so must be, even if he's forgotten why. After a while, I saw Goggle Eye feeling amongst his thick, curly black hair for his pipe, and I guessed his headache was better. When he found it, he filled it ready for a smoke, and I remarked that Mrs. Goggle Eye must be a very good lubra. He smiled approval. "Ah, my word." And I thought if Mrs. Goggle Eye had known everything, she would have given 3 cheers for good old Epsom. As he sat puffing his pipe, I wondered if these extra marks had anything to do with him being king, but knew if I asked questions he would go away. Instead, I showed him a picture of the King of England, Edward VII, and told him that he wore a crown to show he was king. He liked this very much and said so, and then he smoked on in silence. "Me king, all right, my word. I think you're a big mob king." This pleased the vain old chap immediately. "Me plenty savvy corroboree," he chuckled, rubbing his hands up and down his back. "Me savvy all about corroboree." "My word," I said to him, showing my great admiration. "Tell me, Goggle Eye." He hesitated for a while, and then he told me that when a black fellow has been through a corroboree, his teachers put a mark on him to show that he understands all about it. A certificate for the examination, I suppose. Of course, a great number of marks mean a great deal of knowledge. So it was no wonder that Goggle Eye was proud of his, and he felt his certificates. He chuckled. "Big mob sit down long o' me." Corroborees are really books for a tribe, for they have no others. They are not just dancing picnics, as some people might think, but lessons, very hard lessons too. And the old men are the teachers, and the head man is the hard master. And they teach the young men all they should know: how to point death bones, the best way to sing people dead, the way to scare devils away with bull roarers and sacred stones, and all about the laws of marriage, and the proper things to eat, how to make the rain, and what else can I tell you? The man who proves in a great many ways that he understands all he should will one day be king. A black king is not a king because his father was so. As I listened to Goggle Eye's explanation of all this, I thought how necessary it was to have a wise king. Since he has the care of the special death bones and pointing sticks and all the sacred charms, no one knows what terrible things might happen to the tribe if anyone touched these magic charms who did not know how to use them. Why, he might set death bones not working, not be able to stop till everybody was dead, or make a mistake and invite devils to come and chivvy everybody about. When he was meaning to tell them to stay away, it really was too fearful to think about what might happen with a foolish king. When Goggle Eye stopped talking, I asked him what the peculiar mark on his shoulders were, and he said, "Well, What name? You say this one is Goggle Eye, I said, touching him with my finger. He was trying to decide whether it would be all right to tell a white woman what a black lubra must not hear. Wretched little Willy Wagtail flew into the veranda after spiders. No black fellow will talk secrets with one of those little birds about. They say that the telltale of the bush are always spying about, listening for bits of gossip to make mischief. They call them Jenningerries, or mischief makers, and say they love mischief of all kinds. Jenningerry, come on, said Goggle Eye, pointing to the little flirting bird, and I know I should hear no more that day. Very well, I said, giving him a stick of chewback, and sent him back to his camp and called Bet. She came carrying old Solomon Isaacs with our white cockatoo on her wrist and asked me why he has got no legs. But he has, I said, he's got two. No, missus, him hands. And to prove that they were hands, she showed me that he was holding a biscuit with one of them as he nibbled. Perhaps he has one leg and one hand, I suggested, saying that it was his leg he was standing on and his hand was the one with the biscuit in it. That satisfied her, and she was just about to go off to play when the miserable creature changed its biscuit to the other claw. Him two fellow hands, missus. And Bet came back to argue all about it again. Fortunately, Cocky changed the subject by passing a few remarks about himself and the weather, and Bet listened for a while and then informed me that a white man's spirit had jumped into Solomon Isaacs, the cockatoo, when he was born, and that's why he could talk. But Billy Muck had said so. Before I could think of anything to say, the gramophone of the men's quarters began to play. And she and Cocky went off to listen, and I had a little peace. And when she came back, she said, "White missus, some white fellow bosses were in the men's room. I wonder what's going on, because white missus were rather scarce out in the bush." I hurried over to the quarters to make the lady welcome. I found no one there excepting the stockman, and they said that no travellers had arrived, not even men. I called Bet and asked her what she had seen the white missus, and she says, "Well, I didn't see them, I only heard them." Him there, missus," she said, pointing to the gramophone. "I been him here, he's sing. Then she wanted to know how they'd got into the gramophone and what they'd had to eat that day. "Which way white fellows sit down, missus?" she asked, peering down the funnel of the gramophone and screwing up her comical little nose to try and shut one eye. "I don't know, Bet," I said, tired of answering questions. "Come for a walkabout in the paddocks." So off they scampered to collect lubras, and by the time they'd arrived at the gate, they were all waiting with their dilly bags. I was the pupil and they were the teachers, and my lessons were most interesting. They tried to teach me the tracks of the animals, how to tell me if the tracks were old or new, where every bird built its nest, what it was built of, and how many eggs it had laid, and where to look for crocodile eggs, and where the bowerbird danced. They knew the tracks of every horse on the run and every blackfellow of the tribe, and if they came onto a stranger's track, they knew the tribe he belonged to. The tribe had tried to teach me, but try as I could never see any difference excepting in size. They were the very patient teachers, and I tried my very best, but I suppose I didn't have the blackfellow's sight for tiny differences, and I failed dismally. I couldn't even learn the track of my own lubras. We all enjoyed the walkabouts and generally had a good time. This afternoon we all found sorts of queer prizes and were coming home with them, when we came upon Goggle Eye's tracks going into our homeward direction. Bet simply refused to go any further, so we took a very short cut through the shrub, and by bad luck came upon the Majesty himself, just as he came up from the creek, and he and Bet shut their eyes at once and felt their way out with outstretched hands. The path was very narrow, and as they groped about, I wondered what would happen if they bumped in together. Perhaps devils would come with a whiz and would have left nothing but a little smoke. Thank you.
Bravo.
And this morning we have a special treat here, Uncle Georgie Kookaburra. Hold on to your hat.
Yes.
Yes. And our guest is here. He's actually not wearing a hat, but that's absolutely fine. And he's a special guy because what I'm really liking about him is that he's a writer. He's written so successfully. He's had so many accolades. He's got best-selling author books, and he's doing his passion. And his name is Adrian Deans, and his latest book is Asparagus Green.
Bravo.
So good morning to you, Adrian. Welcome to KOORI Radio Station.
Thank you very much, Annalisa and Uncle George. Very honoured to be here.
Oh, well, it's just terrific to have you here this morning. And I was hearing you at the Central Coast Writers event, and you told us a very interesting story about how you were actually trying to get published in 2002.
Well, this is actually a true story. In 2002, I received the phone call of which every writer dreams. I had sent off a sample of my latest masterpiece to one of Australia's biggest literary agents, whose name I've changed for the sake of this story. And only 2 days later, the phone rang. Adrian, it's Cass Rosewell. I've just read the piece you sent me. It was fantastic. I'd go so far as to say that yours is the most interesting and original new voice in Australian literature in years. She really did say that. Can you get the rest of me to me today? I couldn't get it to her that day because I was at work in Sydney and the manuscript was at home on the coast. That's a shame, she said, because I have to go into hospital tomorrow for a few days and I'd love to read the rest straight away. I offered to bring it to the hospital. I was that desperate to keep the momentum up. But she said not to worry, just send it to her office and she'd make it her biggest priority. As you can imagine, I was on cloud 9 and stayed there some weeks. Every time the phone rang, I snatched it up in eager haste, but it was never her. Eventually I bit the bullet and decided to call her. Oh, hello Adrian, no, I haven't received it. Could you please send it in again? I really am so looking forward to reading it. So I sent it in again, and about 6 weeks later had a call from a complete stranger. Is that Adrian Deans? Yes. Are you a writer? I like to think so. Who is this? My name's Julie. I've just found your manuscript. What? I was walking in the bush in the Blue Mountains and found a leather satchel with your manuscript in it. Anyway, she arranged to send it to me, but I immediately rang Cass. Oh, Adrian, you wouldn't believe it. I took your manuscript up to my place in the mountains and someone broke into my car and stole it. Can you send it in again? I'm so looking forward to reading it. I sent it in a third time, but in fact she never read my manuscript. Shortly afterwards she got sick, never went back to work, and unfortunately died. That was bad enough for her, but it was devastating for me. The most interesting and original new voice in Australian literature, and no one was listening.
It's just very unfortunate that she passed away.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness. And Adrian, your books are really fast-paced, darkly comic, and always manage to patch a punch with the subtext department. And Stanley Kubrick, of novelists, has said that your work ranges from a huge genre that defies genre.
Well, yes, I describe myself as the Stanley Kubrick of novelists, in that I tend to range across various different styles of work. I've mainly done crime, I suppose, but more recently I've moved into what you might call speculative fiction, and blended the two in a way. But my latest is more a political satire.
Well, I'm loving Asparagus Green. It is certainly it's a terrific novel. But your first novel with the dark, if you like, slightly naughty lawyer, who was really causing havoc, but trying to help people in some ways, but doing his best to really destroy people if he didn't like them. Does that sound a little bit of a snapshot of that first novel?
Well, the first novel was Mr. Clean Sheets. My second novel, Straight Jacket, was about the naughty lawyer.
Naughty lawyer.
And our hero, Morgan, is a lawyer with an overactive sense of justice. He's very clever and very wealthy and takes an interest in anonymous strangers. If he likes you, he's able to pull strings in the shadowy background and make your life better in wonderful ways. But if he doesn't like you, well, your destiny is likely to take a dramatic downturn, and you'll never know why.
Well, Uncle Georgie, don't we like that? Someone that can actually make our lives better
Yeah.
in all ways. I'm really looking forward to reading that one. But we'll stick to business today, Mr. Adrian Deans from the Central Coast, from the Darrinjung people up there and you originally came from North Sydney, where some of your novels are set.
Yeah.
But tell us a bit about firstly the cover of Asparagus Green, which viewers and listeners, you'll see it in the bookshops and airport terminals.
Not yet. It'd be nice if it would wind up there.
We'll have a talk to them on your behalf, I think. But listen, the book cover of this book, it is in a frog green with sapphire blues and greys, and it's a terrific book cover. I really want to congratulate you, because I know that your publisher didn't want to have a bar of it, and then you changed their minds. But tell the listeners today a little bit about the story behind the photograph on the book cover.
Well, the photograph is actually a picture of a man standing on an ice lake in northern Canada, and in the sky above him is a picture of the Milky Way, which was taken on a slow shutter speed by a friend of ours, and which makes the Milky Way stand out as prominently as it does. And the instant I saw that photo, which she had posted on, I think it was Facebook, I said immediately, I've got to have that for the cover of Asparagus Grass. It's just wonderful. And I immediately had a vision of what the cover would look like, and I sent the photo to the publisher, which is
Yes.
Andrew at Hague Publishing in Perth, and he ummed and ahed about it. He said, "Oh no, I don't know about that." But he, to his credit, he went with it and got his cover expert to work on it, and she came up with exactly what my vision was, and it's a lovely story. Utterly wonderful.
And Asparagus Green, the listeners know what Asparagus Green is, and they've heard of it. They're trying to visualize it, but we're a little bit. You make a reference to it, how it's taken over.
Well, forgive me for correcting you. It's asparagus grass.
Oh, please go for it.
Also known as asparagus fern.
Yes.
It's a horrible, tough, spiky weed that will conquer entire suburbs if not ripped out quickly. It's entirely taken over Avoca Beach, where I live. So, if you'd like me to tell you a little bit about the story.
We'd love to hear. Please continue.
Well, our hero Mitch is a Sydney gardener, and his job is to pull out asparagus grass, which becomes a metaphor for a profound struggle that has been happening for 2 million years. So Mitch is not much interested in any sort of struggle. He's a man of simple tastes and pleasures, and his life is very ordinary until he becomes involved with two strange young women. Lisa is a permanent uni student engaged in some very arcane research, and the other, Marty Mindshadow, has a deeply mysterious background, and as Mitch is drawn into their worlds, finds his head exploding with the enormity of the perils before him, a galactic war in which he has suddenly become a key player.
Wow, I really like the way that Asparagus Grass started out solidly grounded in there, and in the here and now, and but then, Adrian, it transitions into something pretty far out.
Yeah, I've always liked sci-fi or even fantasy stories that start with reality and gradually morph into something different. It makes the different stuff seem more real that way, and I much prefer stories that seem real than stories that are obviously unreal. And the satirical ideas that I'm working with will also have more oomph that way.
And Mr. Adrian Deans, just take us back to the subtext of Asparagus Grass. How does that actually work and transpire?
Well, in a couple of ways. I guess the main approach is that one of the characters is an alien from an ancient galactic culture who asks some pretty fundamental questions about conditions on our planet. And her attitude to a whole lot of socio-political or socio-economic stuff that we take for granted on Earth makes us look pretty primitive from her wider perspective.
I love the fact that you've made her a female.
Well, yes, but both her and Lisa, the other main female role, are very important to the story, and they both get lots of pretty good lines. Especially Marty when making poor old Mitch feel very inadequate in all sorts of ways.
Can you give us an example?
I've got a little section that I'd be happy to read if you would like me to.
Oh, the listeners, what do you think? Do we want to hear Adrian Deans' asparagus grass story? Yes, we do. Please continue.
Come on, mate.
Come on.
Okay. Well, this is quite early in the story. Mitch is in the beer garden with his mate Cam, and has just been telling him that he's in trouble with his boss, Mr. Garrett. Don't turn round, I said, but two girls have just sat down about 3 tables away. So one of them is Lisa, Garrett's daughter. Lisa Garrett was a perpetual student who did temp work in the office during uni breaks. She would have been a year or two younger than me, but had about 17 degrees. Cam was grinning like a loon. Garrett's daughter? Oh, this is priceless. He turned casually and turned back. Blonde hair or spiky black? Spiky black. Of course, she's the student, right? In fact, she'd always been quite friendly when we'd met in the office. Always had a bit of a laugh with me, but it was a tad awkward right now with her old man about to sack me. Ask him over, said Cam. No way, I hissed, but there was an inevitability about the situation, and at that moment she caught my eye. Mitchell! Hi, Lisa. She appraised me coolly for a few moments through inscrutable sunnies, while sipping a gin and tonic through a short black straw. Aren't you going to introduce me? Oh, Lisa, this is Cam, and this is Barb, said Lisa, nodding at her friend. Shall we come and join you? Absolutely, said Cam, surreptitiously putting out his cigarette. The girls gathered up their drinks and bags and made their way over as I cringed with pre-embarrassment, anticipating the fun Cam was about to have at my expense. You guys smokers? Asked Barb, noting the ashtray. I'm not, I said, but Cam enjoys sucking carcinogenic toxins into his lungs. Thank God for that, said Barb, with a reproving glance at Lisa. It's such a pain drinking with non-smokers. Ain't that the truth, agreed Cam, relighting his stubbed-out rollie. All that passive judgment, even when they're saying nothing, does me head in. Within seconds, Barb and Cam were chatting away like a couple of flaming lorikeets, and Lisa grinned at me speculatively. I stared back at her, quite liking her spiky hair with crimson tips and bright crimson lipstick that made her mouth look like a succulent fruit. How's work with my old man? Okay, I said. I don't see him much. Lucky you. I didn't respond, and she grinned. It's okay, Mitch. I know he's a ratbag, so don't feel awkward. He's just doing his job, I suppose. Yeah, so are the guards at Auschwitz. Snorting beer through your nose and spraying half the table is not the suavest reaction to a joke, but it got me a smile from Lisa as I wiped my mouth and mopped at my shirt. That's an appalling habit, Mitchell, snorting beer. At least use a straw. I found myself enjoying her company in a way I never really had before. She'd always seemed so obviously unobtainable, the boss's daughter from a different tribe, and yet here she was, sitting at my table and telling me she didn't like her tribe. Everything's so dysfunctional at home, she was saying a couple of gins later. Dad's a bloody Nazi and Mum gets by on a cocktail of Valium and Sylvia Plath. She has this romantic delusion that Dad's Ted Hughes and spends all days writing tragic poetry. Tragically bad, I should say, rather than tragic in the Plathian sense. Oh, well, I said, it can't be that bad if you still live at home. She looked at me like I was mad. I would do anything to move out of home, Mitchell. Anything. Oh, except get a job and pay rent. For a moment I thought she would get angry, but she suddenly laughed and said, Dad always says you're a smart ass. Really? He talks about staff at home? Only the troublemakers. That was a weird thought, to think that you had some sort of secondary existence in other people's conversations. I suppose I talked about him, but bosses are different. Speaking of trouble, she said, let's make some tonight. I looked up at her, still inscrutable behind those dark sunglasses. What'd you have in mind, I asked. Are you busy? Not really. Cam. I nudged Cam to drag him back into the conversation. What? We're free tonight? Yeah, we're good. Good, echoed Lisa, banging her empty glass down on the table. I want to be bad.
Geez, mouth looking like a succulent fruit.
Yes, it's
with the crimson lipstick, was it? Magenta
Yes.
lipstick?
Crimson. It's an interesting image, isn't it?
It is, especially the crimson lipstick. And guards at Auschwitz. Very good.
Ah, well. We all think about our bosses in inappropriate ways.
Absolutely. Look, Adrian, no one could say that you were, preachy or boring, because your characters do all the heavy lifting through their words and actions, and while having a cool adventure, and that leaves the reader to decide how they feel about that.
That's my approach to subtext. The books that try to tell you what to think get very boring very quickly, and my books are always about something moral. They always have some kind of subtextual message, but I never ever tell people what to think. I have the characters do certain things and say certain things, and let the readers decide for themselves how they want to feel about that sort of thing.
I noticed they were having a lot of sex.
Yes, in Asparagus Grass there is some sex, but as I was explaining to before, there's a reason for the sex. It's not just gratuitous. One of the main characters has been in a mentally damaged state, and it's only the flood of dopamine in her brain after sex that restores her neurochemistry for a brief and lucid interval.
Which is very positive.
It is very, very positive indeed.
There should be more of it.
There should definitely be more sex.
I believe there should be. Uncle Georgie, he would concur with that fact as well. So the Australian novelist Peter Goldsworthy compares you with the great American satirist Kurt Vonnegut. Vonnegut. Pardon?
I was almost embarrassed to get that comparison. Peter Goldsworthy contacted me out of the blue because he quite enjoyed some other writing I'd been doing, and he just happened to be one of my favourite Australian novelists. He wrote Maestro, which a lot of HSC students would know, and Honk If You're Jesus, which is I think a wonderful satirical novel. And he contacted me to tell me how much he'd enjoyed my writing, and I said to him, "You're not the Peter Goldsworthy, are you?" And the novelist, and he confessed that he was, and so we did a bit of a book swap and became friends, and I was very fortunate in that he agreed to read Asparagus Grass and provide a cover quote. And,
lovely. And what did he say in his quote?
Well, he said words to the effect of Kurt Vonnegut meets Jason Bourne. So I couldn't have come up with a better line myself. Kurt Vonnegut he wrote Slaughterhouse 5 was his most famous book, but a wonderful, wonderful writer, and I loved him to bits when I was a teenager. So I dare say that explains the influence.
Oh, isn't it lovely to? It's great to have an influence, and you really only need one or so, but someone so powerful like that, as from your background, your history of when you were young, and it's carried you through all these decades.
I think most novelists would tell you that they are the sum of all their influences, plus hopefully the way they've integrated all of that is original and fresh in the way that they look at the world.
Well, I found that your writing is fresh, and there's no hiccups with it. It just flows. It feels good. It's racy. It rolls off the tongue, so to speak, or rolls off the eyes as you read the story, and just something to Asparagus Green is real. Grass is absolutely a book that is a really good read.
Well, thank you.
congratulations on that. You've done such a great job. And it's been wonderful having you here with us today. Thank you so much for coming in.
Well,
And
thank you very much, Annalisa, and thank you, Uncle George.
And we will see you next time with your next novel.
Well, I've already finished the sequel to Asparagus Grass, and so that will be hopefully out next year sometime.
My word, that's fantastic news. You must be very pleased because it's not easy. Well, it's for some of us it's easier than others, isn't it? But
I have been doing it quite a long time now. It does get easier.
I think it's been about 30 years, hasn't it?
It has.
Yeah, well, it's just been lovely meeting you today, and we will... Sorry, I've just dropped my... It's okay, everyone, I'm still here. I just dropped my book on the floor, and I'm back here today. It's lovely, and we'll see you next time when you come onto the program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I've got a little poem here today for you. Winnie the Wombat's brought it into the studio. And here it is, Our Kitchen. We love our small kitchen. Really ain't much room. Maybe 2 forks, 2 knives, maybe 1 spoon. We love our small kitchen. But the toaster got squashed. Kettle's on the edge. We don't care a bit. We love our small kitchen. Built for 2. Touching each other's bums as we squish right on through. To get to the jam, that's what we love to do. We love our small kitchen, with our cupboards busting wide. Where is that special teacup? Where does the Vegemite hide? And it's always a good time. It's always a good time for a hug. And a hug, hugs say a lot to people. And our strength comes from our hugs and powerful healing forces that is given through physical contact. So this is what I'm saying to you guys today. 4 hugs a day is survival. 8 hugs a day is maintenance. 12 hugs a day is growth. And we've got one here from the one and only poem by Banjo Patterson, The Man from Ironbark. It was the man from Ironbark who struck the Sydney town. He wandered over street and park, he wandered up and down. He loitered here, he loitered there, till he was like to drop. Until at last in sheer despair he sought a barber's shop. Shave my beard and whiskers off, I'll be a man of mark, and I'll go and do the Sydney toff up home in Ironbark. The barber was as small and flash as barbers mostly are. He wore a strike-your-fancy sash. He smoked a huge cigar. He was a humorist of note and keen at repartee. He laid the odds and kept a tote, whatever that may be. And when he saw our friend arrive, he whispered, "Here's a lark. Just watch me catch him all alive, this man from Ironbark." There were some gilded youths that sat along the barber's wall. Their eyes were dull, their heads were flat, they had no brains at all. To them the barber passed the wink, his dexter eyelid shut. "I'll make this bloomin' yokel think his bloomin' throat is cut." And as he soaped and rubbed it, he made a rude remark. "I suppose the flats is pretty green up there in Ironbark." A grunt was all he got. He shaved the bushman's chin, then made the water boiling and dipped the razor in. He raised his hand, his brow grew black. He paused a while to gloat, then slashed the red-hot razor back across his victim's throat. Upon the newly shaven skin it made a livid mark. No doubt it fairly took him in, the man from Ironbark. He fetched up a wild country yell, might wake the deer to hear. And though his throat he knew full well was cut from ear to ear, he struggled gamely to his feet and faced the murderous foe. "You've done for me, you dog. I'm beat. One more hit and I'm go. I only wish I had a knife, you blessed murdering shark. But you'll remember all your life the man from Ironbark." He lifted up his hairy paw with one tremendous clout, and he landed on the barber's jaw and knocked the barber out. He set to work with nail and tooth. He made the place a wreck. he grabbed the nearest gilded youth and tried to break his neck. And all the while his throat he held to save the vital mark. And murder, bloody murder, yelled the man from Iron Bark. A peeler man who heard the din came in to see the show. He tried to run the bushman in and he refused to go. And when at the last the barber spoke and said 'twas all in fun, 'twas just a little harmless joke, a little overdone. A joke, he cried, by George, that's fine, a lively sort of lark. I'd like to catch that murdering swine right in Iron Bark. And now while round the shearing floor the listening shearers grape, he tells the story over and over and brags of his escape. Them barber chaps what keeps a tote, by George, I've had enough. One tried to cut my bloomin' throat and thank the Lord it's tough. And whether he's believed or no, there's one thing to remark. The flowing beards are all the way to go up in Iron Bark. And that's all we've got for you today, Uncle Georgie. Uncle Georgie, we've had a beautiful show today, and it's Christmas coming up, and asparagus grass will be available at the to purchase.
You can
Adrian?
You can order it in any good bookstore, or through the publisher's website, Hague Publishing.
Oh, great! And how do we spell the Hague?
Hague.
Hague Publishing. Oh, lovely. And it's just been a pleasure here today to have Australia's great author with us, Adrian Deans. He's actually written his second one, as he was saying, Uncle Georgie.
Well, we could make you...
mean,
you could
a
be on the
sequel.
boomerang.
You can be on the boomerang.
Yeah, and we'd love to support you.
Thank you.
And please bring your lovely wife with you.
I never go anywhere without her.
I don't think you could have written this book without her.
So bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
We're over time. Lots of love.
Hugs, 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 hugs.
The old man fell asleep today.